Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora, Chewy, sir.
How you doing, man?
Good, man. I just realised we haven't tested our sound yet tonight, so we're going to do that live in the show. But as I'm getting that set up, how's the car? Everyone wants to know what's going on.
Well, the car's good. I haven't crashed it yet, which is great. I've just took it for a drive out to Mosgiel after work today, and it's just nice to think, wow, what a pointless, frivolous trip we just did. It cost us like nothing.
Very nice. Are we vibing together, by the way?
We are vibing. I think
Okay.
you might have your speakers on too, by the way.
You're good at that now. You're real good at that. There we go. They're off, just like that. So, good to see you all. This is the night. We're just going to dance all night long. Hopefully you're good. We should put ourselves live on TikTok, then we can dance. Okay. Now, I've told you yesterday and last night that I'm going to be a bit of I'm going to push something over the next wee while, and that is for you guys to help us out. So many of you say, oh, we love what you do. Thanks so much for what you do. We appreciate what you do, and we're stoked to do it for you. And sometimes we say, here's how you can help us, and here's how you can help us. Here's a genuine way you can help us. I'm going to put it in the chat right now. You can help us by heading to the New Zealand Podcast Award website, which I can show you actually, because here's one I prepared earlier. And going into the vote for your favorite podcast in this year's Listeners' Choice Awards, right there, ching ching, like that. Put the podcast name. You can put hashtag BHN or Big Hairy News, whichever you want. Your own personal details and the link to the podcast. The link to the podcast is in the chat. Now, because it's an audio podcast, this is an audio podcast as well, probably best to put a link to the podcast that's not the YouTube one. That's one of the ones off either Apple or Spotify or Google Podcasts. Now, I've given you the link in the chat. I've just put it in there. For the Apple one, if you don't have one, you can put it in there. And yeah, help us win that fucking thing. I don't know how realistic that is. I mean, we're up against like Newstalk ZB and RNZ and MediaWorks and all the independent podcasts as well. And you know, we just like to create a bit of a ruckus, and Gareth is about to be banned. If you can see what Gareth just said in the chat, Joey, I think we should ban him now. That should be absolute permanent banning.
You chose poorly, Gareth.
So if you want to help us, it's a way you can help us, and if we can make our way up those sort of awards rankings, that will genuinely help us, especially for what we're sort of looking at for 2024. So put your details in there and pass it around as well. I'll be tweeting it out every couple of days. If you're following me on Twitter, pass that on, get other people to vote for it as well, so we can make a few waves. The other way you can support us, you guys know about this, and it's the last few days, and we're not here live tomorrow night, so this will be the second to last day we'll tell you about this, and that is of course the last couple of days for our bottom feeder merch, and that is bottom feeder hoodies, bottom feeder t-shirts in tan, rust and black, and also the general BHN gear as well. The bottom feeder gear goes away on Thursday, never to be seen again, so this is your last chance to get them. bhnshop.nz if you would like to be a part of that, and we would be stoked to receive your purchase. Not entirely sure how else to say that. Also, remember, we're not losing the love we have for you patrons as well. It's just that I kind of sometimes feel like I don't want to be constantly talking to you about money. So when we're talking about the merch, we don't talk as much about the patrons. We love you patrons. We don't pitch for more patrons, but just to say we are there and we love you for that. And thank you, because the patrons are the guys who support us kind of all through the year, not just when merch drops. So love you to bits. We've got about 100, I think, but 100 patrons, which is great. Actually, really helpful, really useful, and does genuinely help to pay a few of the bills. All right. Geez, lots going on today, mate. We have got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about when it comes to Israel and Gaza and free speech. We've also got some stuff to talk about. The reason I'm looking off camera is I'm trying to decide where are we going to start. I think I know where we might start.
I've got some nonsense we can start with, Pat, if you like.
And then we're also going to talk a little bit about how national tax plans are stuck in reverse. We'll give you the details about why that is shortly. But you go, Chewy, give us some nonsense.
Now, of course, I'm not on Twitter anymore. But every now and then, like someone who's left the party when it starts to get a bit awkward, I like to check in with how things are going. I saw this today.
Oh, yeah.
Look at that. Elon Musk just absolutely losing his nana by the minute. I mean, does someone need to intervene? Does someone need to kick in the bathroom door and slap the phone out of his hands at this point? I saw, he bought Twitter for $44 billion. Latest evaluations just come in.
Really? Oh, hang on. Let me guess. 17 billion.
Oh, close. 22.
So he's lost half. He's lost $22 billion.
What a genius. Watch me make this money. Just a beer.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So yes, if you're still on Twitter, stop encouraging this nonsense.
Don't hassle us Twitter. Don't hassle us Twitter users. It is, the idiocy of the man who actually whose product became a part of the verbiage of the world, right? To tweet something. So there was words invented and used by society, verbs, about the most famous brand in the world. If you're drinking like a Pepsi, you don't Pepsi something, or if you're wearing Nikes, you don't Nike something, so these massive brands don't have it. He actually had a brand which had entered the lexicon as a verb, and he went, I know what I'll do. I'll change it and throw it away because I'm a child of the 90s and I want to make everything extreme. And I just, who knows? It's just lunacy. It's just lunacy. Speaking of lunacy, I think what we're going to do, we've kind of got two stories tonight on Gaza, sort of. One's more about free speech. It involves some byproduct of Gaza, and the other one is about Gaza in and of itself. I put out a tweet today, which I'll share shortly, that basically talks about, I saw music playing from somewhere. Hang on, I've got to go find that, or else we're not going to be able to play anything. I put out a tweet today that basically asked about, what's comparable when it comes to two entities fighting one another, when it comes to people dying, etc., which we'll get to shortly. But firstly, I thought what we'd do is actually just share the story. Netanyahu has been asked by the world, I guess, for a ceasefire, and he has just steadfastly gone, no, that is never going to happen. Let's have a look at the news story first, and then we'll come back to some more conversations about innocent civilians dying in Gaza and also in Israel.
Mm-hmm. Israel's Prime Minister is rejecting calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu says his ground invasion offers the only chance to free hostages.
It comes as Israel reported it had freed one of its soldiers who had been taken hostage.
The only chance seems like a bit of a stretch. Like if Israel said to Hamas, we will stop bombing you if you release the hostages in the next 24 hours. They haven't done that. So when he says it's the only way, I don't think that's necessarily accurate. If he had tried lots of other ways, I'm just talking logistically here, and they'd all failed, he might get to that, but that hasn't been offered or tried yet. So surely one can't claim this is the only way, Chewy.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen things where they go, "Oh, we'll do anything to free the hostages." Okay, well, you call a ceasefire. Well, no. Okay, well, they've said that they'll release them if you let every Palestinian political prisoner go. Will you do that? Well, no. Okay, so you won't do anything to get the hostages back. You do a land invasion. Okay, cool.
All right, we'll keep going with News Hub.
By Hamas, and a warning US correspondent Mitch McCann's report contains distressing images.
On the main road through the Gaza Strip, Israel is moving with force. This video posted on social media shows one of its tanks opening fire at a small car. Israeli ground forces are moving in on Gaza City, backed up by firepower from above. a glimpse into an operation that has been carried out in great
Jesus
secrecy.
Yeah.
Right.
What is clear is
It
that
looks like we're looking at an ancient ruins from Roman times. You know, that's how devastated the area is.
much of Gaza has been leveled since the Hamas attack 3 weeks ago. The Gaza Health Ministry, an agency in the Hamas-controlled government, says 8,000 people have now died. But amid calls from humanitarian groups for a ceasefire, Israel's Prime Minister today said this is a time for war, not peace.
Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen.
Benjamin Netanyahu said the invasion will
What
put
a
pressure on
dickhead.
Hamas to release Israeli hostages. It doesn't create the certainty
Or it might put pressure on Hamas to get rid of them quickly so they can escape. You know, so it could do that as well.
that will happen, he says, but the possibility that it might.
Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas.
And he has his first victory. Ori Megiddish, an Israeli soldier taken hostage by Hamas, was freed during the operation in Gaza last night. But even as the young private was being welcomed back home by her family, others are still being held, like these 3 women who feature in a new hostage video. It's unknown if they were being coerced into what to say, and we will not share it. While Israel hunts for its hostages, Palestinian paramedics have a different target, racing through the streets of Gaza to reach the injured from each airstrike, as the sound of the next one rings out. In the ambulance, a young girl is treated for a head injury as someone in front of her gets CPR. This is what Israel says it's, quote, going out of its way to avoid. In New York, Mitch McCann, News Hub.
So, yeah, disturbing
The owner
is
of failed
the
online
right
grocer.
word. Go away there. That's the story from today, right? Israel has basically said no to any idea of a ceasefire and making all sorts of absolute statements that this is the only way it can work. Now, correct me, Chewy, you know more about World War I, World War II than I did. Did anyone ever call for a ceasefire after Pearl Harbor? I don't feel anyone called for a ceasefire after 9/11 because it wasn't. No one went to the George Bush war going into Iraq. Ceasefire, because it wasn't like the neighbors happening. I don't know if there was a ceasefire call. So it feels like what Netanyahu's doing is going, they wouldn't have stopped it for a ceasefire, because I don't recall that from 9/11. Do you know anything about a call for ceasefire after Pearl Harbor?
No. So a couple of differences that jump to mind straight away if you're going to draw a line between what's happening now in Israel and Palestine with Pearl Harbor is Pearl Harbor and the war in the Pacific was 2 nation states with an air force and a navy and an army, and they Pearl Harbor was a military target. I couldn't even call what's happening in Israel a war, because in a war you need 2 armies fighting.
Yeah.
There's just one against the city. And yes, Hamas kicked over the fucking hornet's nest. You know, like even that piece of footage that they showed at the start of the car being shot by the tank. You know, I've seen TikToks and that sort of thing going, look, these guys blow up a civilian car. I kind of see it from the Israeli point of view there. That car looked very, very low to the ground, and could have been a bomb. I get that.
Sure.
But I keep coming back to the fact that how densely populated Gaza is, how little time people had to evacuate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Israel's got the fig leaf of like, oh, we told people to evacuate to the south, but they were doing military strikes to the south. That they've cut the Gaza Strip in half. If you couldn't get out, then you are trapped in there. and anything that moves in that rubble, if you're an Israeli soldier in a tank and you're looking out your little periscope and that sort of thing, and you see something move in the rubble, you will blast it.
Yeah.
You won't wait to see if the guy's wearing a Hamas fucking hoodie or something. You'll just start blasting. And with half of the population of the Gaza Strip being under the age of 18, like how is this anything but a series of war crimes? Like it's I keep coming back to like the comparison I saw this week is, do you remember during the Bosnian conflict and the terrible massacres that happened there that were just crime, not just war crimes, but crimes against humanity?
Yeah.
Do you remember the worst one? Srebrenica?
It rings a bell.
Yeah. They killed 7,000 people in about a week.
Mm.
And we've surpassed that in Gaza.
Yeah. Yeah.
People went to the Hague for that.
Love being educated by the chat. Spider Hoof is with us. G'day, Spides. Pearl Harbor ceasefire was after the nukes, at which point US took over the country and
They called
them.
They dropped one bomb and they asked for a complete surrender, a total unconditional surrender.
Yep.
And then they dropped the second bomb, and then that got the answer.
So what Netanyahu just said was implying straight after Pearl Harbor happened, they wouldn't do a ceasefire. That's not when the ceasefire was agreed to, after Pearl Harbor. Obviously, it was a good time later. Now I want to show you the tweet I put out today, because then we're actually going to go on to a piece of content from about 2 weeks ago. But lots of people mentioned it to me after I put this tweet out, so I'm going to play it because I'm sure most of you have seen it, but I'm going to play it because it relates to exactly what we're talking about today. So this is what I put out today. This was my tweet, and be honest with me, chat. I don't think this is neither a pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, or pro-Israel, anti-Palestine tweet. I think this is a question about the armed conflict. That's how I feel. Others, trust me in my comments, have read it differently, but that's how I see it. I said this: how many people does Israel need to kill in Gaza to make up for the atrocious acts of Hamas when they brutally murdered innocent festival goers? 5,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million? What's the number of dead Palestinians that will make an act of terror by Hamas even? That's what I put out today. And as you can see, there was a pretty big engagement in that throughout the whole day.
Yeah, I bet.
But I mean, I think that, I was refreshed to see what it's at. Yeah, 5,500 people have been involved with that today. I think that's the reason it's fair is because we are saying what Hamas did was an act of terror. I'm saying that. What they did, killing innocent lives, no problem. No problem of labeling it that. But you don't have to say that means they're wrong and Israel's right, or vice versa. It doesn't mean if you're on Palestinian signs, you have to say Hamas is right and Palestinians wrong. And Israel's wrong. What I want to know is, when does the killing stop? And at the moment, the killing is all going sort of one way. I know that Hamas is still firing rockets into Israel, but we're not hearing, I could be wrong, but we're not hearing about dozens and dozens and hundreds and thousands of deaths in Israel at the minute. And at what point in their equation do they go, we lost 1,500, then we need 150,000 of yours dead, and then we'll call it even? Now, I know that's not how it works, but it was just a little thought I had today. What I got, Chewy, was several people messaging me about this clip. Now, I know some of you in the chat have kind of seen this clip, and it is Bassam Youssef, and this went viral apparently. I didn't see it until just today. Having a similar conversation with Piers Morgan to that question, like when, and I'm not saying this, and I don't think he says this, like, when does Israel have its pound of flesh? That's the question that's being asked. And so I'm going to play a bit of it. We'll have a listen to it, and then we'll go from there. So have a listen to the start of this conversation.
Then the question then becomes again about proportion. I don't disagree that there's been a lot of bad stuff on both sides going back historically for decades. But if we agree that this was on a different level altogether, quite deliberately by Hamas, designed,
absolutely.
designed to provoke. No, here's my question. Let me ask you a question. And the question, because you raised it earlier about proportion. I honestly don't know what the proportionate response is. I honestly don't. I don't. I've been watching the airstrikes this week thinking...
So what's your question?
Well, I would ask you, if you were Israel, what would you...
If I was Israel.
If you were Israel and that had happened to you, what would you think would be the appropriate way for the country to respond?
Well, I mean, like, worst question in the world. You know, sure. If you're
Piers Morgan, so
yeah, I mean, like, so if you were the people that you say are overreacting, disproportionately attacking the people you're supporting, how would you act about that? You know, ridiculous question. But to his credit, and this is I think why it went a bit viral, he does answer and goes on.
I would do exactly like Israel did, kill as many people as possible, since the world is letting me do it. I mean, I can do it because I can, But the thing is, what? I agree with you. And you know what? I'm going to be even ahead of you, because I see the question coming. Do you condemn Hamas for the atrocity? Yes, I condemn Hamas. I condemn Hamas. Hamas is the source of all evil. They're a reason for everything. And you know what? Let's, for a minute, imagine a world without Hamas.
Right.
What will this word look like? Let's give this word a name, and let's name this word the West Bank. Hamas has absolutely no control in the West Bank. And since the beginning of this year, only through August, 37 Palestinian kids were killed. No music festival, no paragliding, no Hamas. Since the occupation of the West Bank, 7,000 Palestinians were killed. No music festival, no paragliding, no Hamas. I can go on and on and on and on.
No, but you don't need to, because in a way you're preaching to the choir. I've followed this crisis.
Oh no, you're not preaching. So the thing is, like,
in the sense that I know that what you're saying has validity. Of course,
Piers. By the way, Piers. I am at a disadvantage here. I can hear you. I cannot see you. I am in a claustrophobic room, and so please cut me some slack and don't interrupt me and interrupt my point.
Sure.
So, because this has to be fair.
Understand.
Because if you want to only hear your opinion, I can just condemn Hamas and go home. I can do that. So, do you want to do that, or do you have a much more nuanced conversation?
No, I absolutely want to have a nuanced conversation. I wasn't aware I was interrupting you. I thought I was letting you speak.
Amazing. So I would say I really applaud Israel for doing one thing that no military force in the world does. Because I heard Ben Shapiro and I heard Ron DeSantis, and they said Israel is the only military force in the world that warns civilians before bombing them. I mean, how fucking cute. That is so nice of them. Because with this logic, if Russian troops started warning Ukrainians before bombing their houses, we're cool with Putin, right? I mean, okay, Habibi, you have warned them, go invade. It's fine. You have done your job. I mean, the thing is, and I understand, and I also heard Ben Shapiro talking about Human Shield. So you remember my wife's family, they live in Gaza. So I asked them, I told them, when Israel give you the nice warning, the cute warning, does Hamas force you to stay in your home so you can be bombed and use as Human Shield? You know what, Hassan here, my wife's cousin, he's a loser, He told me, when I asked him, does that happen? He told me, no. The lying son of a bitch lied to me. I told him, you don't understand. Ben Shapiro and Ron DeSantis keep saying that Israel warns you and Hamas asked you to stay put. So I told you, he's a loser. He never kept a job. He even failed in all of the interviews to become like a human shield. I would believe Ben Shapiro.
Let me ask you this,
So let's go with that. No. Let me ask you.
At some point, I must be able to ask you questions. It's not a monologue for you, Bassem.
If we agree that for the 14,000 casualties, I mean, who's counting, are Human Shield, does that mean that every single one of those civilians was standing, obscuring a military target behind them? Because that's a lot of weapons. I mean, Hamas is packing.
No, of course it doesn't.
There you go. There's a very good, I think, conversation around proportionality and disproportionality. So. Yeah, I hadn't seen that clip. Chewy, got any thoughts around what we've just seen, what we're thinking about now about the proportionate response?
Yeah, look, it's not proportionate. It's absolutely not. There's so much I'm furious about here. Like, Israel is an incredibly militarized, heavily protected state. They have some of the most advanced anti-rocket defenses in the world, and probably outside of America. They have more experience in conducting this sort of warfare. But this stuff has been simmering. We have been speaking for years about them shooting at journalists, shooting at kids throwing rocks at tanks. We've spoken about them throwing Palestinians out of Palestinian neighborhoods, and now it's a Jewish neighborhood, and they let the settlers move into their homes and that sort of thing. And that's this just nibble. And now they're talking about, one of the plans that we were just spitballing, that we're just going to start talking about now, is moving 2 million people out of the Gaza Strip and just telling them to fuck off to Egypt, go live in the Sinai. And it's just kind of like they're just dipping the toe in the water, see what the international community thinks of this. But at the moment, we all look impotent. Like governments are going to the UN and saying, yeah, a ceasefire might be good. America's going to veto all of that.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to piss off their lobby at home, and they don't want to piss off the Israelis. They granted a huge amount of emergency military aid. I can't think of a country that needs it less than Israel. They have their own defense manufacturing base. They don't need it. It's infuriating to see it happen, and I am spewing to see it draw focus away from the Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah,
like the media has gone away from that. Like the BBC seems to be quite happy to put on an IDF media spokesperson or someone from the Israeli government and completely just let them hit all of their talking points completely uncritically with no pushback at all, and take it as this is the gospel truth.
Yeah.
They've got no other option because we can't talk to any journalists in Gaza. We can't get, it's completely one-sided for us where we're getting our news from. It's who knows what's going on in there, really.
Because every time we see a drone shot or something like that, everyone goes, fucking hell, because we're not seeing it in mainstream media, right?
Yeah.
Or we see a snippet of it or whatever.
The comparison to what we've seen for the last 2 years of a full-on war in Ukraine, of seeing, footage from both sides, obviously more from Ukraine than from Russia, but we have a better sense of what that, like I remember seeing combat footage from what's that town that they were fighting over for ages? The name escapes me now, but that town that they absolutely flattened block by block, and going, this is the most like destroyed hellscape I've seen since black and white pictures of Stalingrad or something like that. And then Israel has done that to Gaza City in the space of 5 days?
Yeah.
It's an epic amount of firepower for like, they don't have anti-aircraft defenses. They don't have a standing army. You're talking about Hamas with homemade rockets and RPGs and hiding in tunnels and stuff like that. There's no proportionality.
It does make you think when you explain it like that. Is there any possibility of an ally of Hamas, from the region actually coming in to support them? Like, is it going to get that bad that one of the other sovereign nations from the area are going to be like, enough is enough? They wouldn't say it in an English accent, I wouldn't think, but you know what I'm saying? Is what Israel doing getting us closer to that World War III than we've ever been before? Or is it always going to be isolated between those two countries and the world, for some reason, just stand aside?
I mean, Israel, I don't think they've ever admitted it, but it's kind of like it's an open secret that Israel is a nuclear armed state.
Sure.
And it's kind of like, we can do whatever we want because we don't have this, but you all know that we have this. And everyone is so paralyzed because the Middle East is just such a web of intersecting circles of influence and defense pacts and all of that sort of thing. And, you know, maybe if somebody pushes too hard, Iran gets in the mix. What are the Saudis going to do? What are the Russians doing in Syria? You know, it's just the whole thing's a goddamn mess, and the Middle East has always been a goddamn mess. Can you think of something that has more horrific potential to go wrong than a racist religious war of annihilation?
Yeah. Just thinking about the point that was made about Ben Shapiro, you know, kind of singing the virtues, my words, of Israel because they warned people before they bombed them. I wonder if, like, Al-Qaeda had got a hold of the American, the American Secret Service and sent a warning about those planes. Would Ben Shapiro be like, well, you know, at least they gave us a warning. At least they told us it was going to happen, and they gave people an opportunity not to board those planes. I think possibly not. I think possibly he might have a different opinion. We're going to talk shortly. We're going to go talk about tax in a second, but shortly we're going to talk about hypocrisy. And it's related to free speech, and it's related to dishonest actors around free speech. That's going to come up after the next story. But unless there's anything else right now from you, Chewy.
Okay. I got one other. I just remembered, you know, like, Israel is the only army military force in the world that would warn who they're bombing.
Yeah.
There was a leaflet dropping raid above Hiroshima before the Americans dropped the nuke, and, you know, famously, very low civilian casualties there. Very, very low.
All right. Let's move into another conversation. I apologize in advance for giving you this freeze frame, Chewy. I know that it'll give you nightmares for the next few weeks, but we got to do it.
Oh.
He's having a poo right now. You can tell. He was on with Karen this morning. I'm not really going to play much of the conversation, but I wanted to play you a bit of the conversation. So David Seymour's just spent about a minute complaining about why their numbers went from 13-14% down to 9%, blaming everything and, you know, in the media and all this kind of stuff as to why they lost. And then he goes on to talk about how they were almost honest to a fault with their positions and that affected them in the polls. So basically saying, because we said things that were uncomfortable, that we said things that weren't going through the PR campaign, because we did that, people didn't like it and we lost some votes. Now, he didn't use all of those words, but that was the summation of what he was saying. And then he goes through to give the examples of the 3 things that they talked about and the 3 things that are most important to them to kickstart in government. I want to play you this. It only goes for a minute and 19 seconds. And what I want you to listen to is what he says about tax cuts and money. Because I tell you something, Nationals got a problem with their coalition partners.
I also just point out that, you know, ACT is a party that for the last 5 weeks basically relentlessly said things that I believe are true and will be vindicated on. One is the government's out of money and there's not going to be big tax cuts. There will have to be big reductions in spending because what Labor did was unsustainable.
Yeah, okay, so the economy one, yeah.
Yep. 2 is that I think that the situation that we have built up over 40 years around the treaty and what it means to us, that is unfortunately something we now need to discuss. I wish it wasn't. I wish that we'd never gone down the track that this country's been taken in the last 4 decades, but unfortunately it has, and we have to confront it, and that's not an easy conversation. And I think saying that got a lot of people's backs up, got us a lot of negative press out there, but hey, that happens. And I think the third thing is that we were pretty honest about the fact that, you know, we're not here to just change the government, go along and, you know, be good coalition partners if we're not getting the changes that this country needs and that people voted for. And that, again, people said, oh, well, you know, you should just always play nice. Well, actually, you know, our view is that people voted for us to not just make sure the government changes and we have better people in charge.
But there's real change.
Well, so there you go. So that's the 3 points I wanted to share. And I've come to a conclusion about David Seymour. I always say about Sue Bradford that love her or hate her, she is authentic to her beliefs and she stuck by them her whole political campaign. I sort of am starting to feel the same about David Seymour. Like, Winston Peters is always about Winston Peters. I won't take the baubles of office. He took them all. But I do actually think that David Seymour, obviously completely disagree with him politically, but I think that he's, of all the politicians on the right, he is probably someone who believes what he says and is going to stand by it. That's my thoughts. What do you think about that idea, Joey?
Yeah, I think in broad strokes, yeah, I probably agree with that. But my issue with that is, I guess, with Seymour's positioning of ACT as nominally a libertarian party when it absolutely is not, and his inconsistency around that. And yeah, I'd love to see how much pressure he would stand there. I don't think he'll dig a trench line and stick in it. I think he'll go, no, we're not happy with that. We're not going with that. No, we're not happy with that. Oh, all right. I fought my battle.
Yeah, I don't know,
and now I'll fold. I don't know. Maybe we'll see it. But yeah, I don't know. I really struggle to to think positively about Seymour.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I'm thinking positively about him. I just think think that he will stand by what he actually said and what he actually believes. Now, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, most of it's bad as far as I'm concerned from my perspective, then it is what it is. Now, they also had a conversation there about treaty issues. And one of the things that was a little bit terrifying is the treaty issues that Seymour wants to talk about. Plunkett made comments that in 2005, Winston Peters tried to do almost an identical thing. So you've got two parts of a coalition who want to go down that path. Now, we know that Winston Peters did a whole bunch of, throwing himself at the feet of the cookers. I don't think we should put the, Māori issues and treaty issues in that camp, because it has been part of his bread and butter for quite a long time. And if you've got two people in coalition who want that, that's going to be harder, whatever that looks like, and I don't know, but that's going to be harder for National to turn away from if they need two coalition partners and both of them want some kind of referendum on the treaty. Now, I wanted to focus, though, on tax, because I think it was Newshub. Yep, Newshub did quite a good piece today about, was it Newshub that did it? Or it might have been the Herald and Newshub's just showing it. And I think it's Newshub. Looking at like the 47 most interesting and bizarre policies of New Zealand First. And of course, there's a lot in there. But the thing I wanted to look at was the tax one, because remember, you've just heard David Seymour saying there will be no big tax cuts because there is no money. Winston Peters says New Zealand First will legislate, New Zealand First says, New Zealand First will legislate to make the lowest tax bracket, currently $14,000 per annum, of income tax free, no later than 1 April 2027, providing an extra $28.27 a week for workers. So their kind of one promise around tax is to put in a tax bracket that will help the bottom. So all I'm signalling and all I wanted to point out after watching both of these is the cornerstone of National's promise. All of their promises are kind of dovetailed off their big tax cut policies. You've got one of their coalition partners that says there will be no big tax cuts. And you've got another one that says, yeah, we'll do tax cuts, but only for the first tier of income tax, which is actually a perfectly good idea, because that means everyone gets the same break, whether you've got $1 million or whether you've got $80. You get the same break because it's the first $14,000.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to earmark, because I think many of us for a long time have been saying, how will they do this? How is their foreign buyers tax going to work? How are they going to do tax cuts? The foreign buyers tax has to work for them to fund their tax cuts. We all now think the foreign buyers tax isn't going to work. And you've got two coalition partners that are basically both saying no to tax cuts. And I wanted to highlight that today and put it out there to say, watch this space and see what will come out. Because remember, National has made promises, and some of the promises around these tax cuts involve things like, I will resign if we don't do them. So there's some pretty big, they're definitely going to happen. Even when questioned if you can't do the foreign buyers tax, we will do it. That's absolutely what they've said they're going to do. So watch this space. Speaking of spaces, though, it's quite interesting to read some of those things from New Zealand First. Gender issues, amend the Building Act to require, in the interest of safety of women and girls, that all public sector organisations provide separate, clearly demarcated unisex and single-sex bathrooms. under COVID, end all vaccine mandates still operating in some organisations. And one of the ones that pitches straight to those cookers, ready for this? I'll read it out for you word for word. Foreign policy, require a national interest test to stop us being dictated to by the United Nations and agencies like the World Health Organization. Defund any public participation in the World Economic Forum, known in cooker circles as WEF, and related bodies where their deliberations intend the removal of independent democratic decision-making by sovereign nations. So there's just a couple more things about that, but I wanted to mostly share the tax stuff, Chewy. What are your thoughts?
Look, I don't care who brings it up. Like, a bracket of your first income is tax-free up to X amount. I'm a fan of.
Yep.
Like, if they can get that across the line, great. If they can get any of that other nonsense across the line, they can get fucked. Like, come on, amend the Building Act. What the hell? It's just nonsense. It's almost also we'll put one sensible thing in, and then we'll just go to Telegram and see what else he wants to put in. Yeah. It's just so disappointing.
Kim's asking, what's a cooker? It's a slang term. Some would consider it, probably Elon Musk would consider it a derogatory term to do with conspiracy theories. Like they've cooked up a conspiracy theory. So
or their brains are cooked.
Or their brains are cooked, yeah. So, Free Soul says, a Liz Gunn voter.
Yes.
That pretty much sums it up quite well. Yeah, so watch this space on the tax. Remember, this Friday, which is about the 3rd of November. Shit, November, bro. 8 weeks from Christmas. Is the final results from the specials. And then you'll know whether National can do it with one party or two parties, and if they are going to have any problems with one of those two minor parties. So Friday's going to be a big day, and we'll talk to you about it on Monday.
Actually, tangent time about the specials.
Yeah,
right. Just something that again I've been disappointed to see regurgitated in the media, and to see Luxon play into it as well. It's talking about how counting the specials is taking too long, that it's delaying everything.
Yeah,
like it is part of our form of democracy. Is it's not counting the specials; it's counting the fucking votes.
Yeah,
those specials are like if you voted outside of your electorate, that sort of thing, to make sure that people don't vote twice. Is one of those things, which I think we can all agree is an important part of it.
Well, it's not that I agree with this, but Labor did bring in a change to how it happens, which has caused it to take another week.
Yep.
So in the old days, you could just count them wherever. And now they have to be returned to the district they're from. So if you're in Dunedin and you vote in Auckland, a special, it has to get sent to Dunedin to be counted in Dunedin. So whether that was necessary or not, I don't know. But I guess for people to be aware, it's added only an extra 7 days to what it used to be. So it's actually, it's not like it's gone from everything on the night to a month later. It's gone like from 2 weeks to 3 weeks, or from 1 week to 2 weeks, whatever it ends up being. So it's added a bit more, but it's nothing too strenuous.
But I've seen certainly Luxon playing up the inconvenience of it taking so long, almost as a sideways way of getting to the point of like, maybe we shouldn't allow people to register and vote on the day, because that's what's making it take so long.
I just wish they'd hurry up, because there's nothing in the fucking news for New Zealand politics at the moment.
Now, let's talk about that as well. Nothing in the news. When was the last time we heard about a ram raid?
Yeah, interesting how it's gone quiet, eh?
It's gone absolutely quiet on all of these big issues that are plaguing the country. Hoodie gangs, smash and grab everything. Nothing. Ram raids, nothing. Gang processions, nothing. Like, it's all gone quiet. And it's almost like someone walked into the newsroom and going, right, election's over. Now we're not talking about bad stuff anymore. We're just going to talk about something else.
Yeah.
Yep. Crime is over.
A big thanks to Spider Hoof, who has given us a $5 super chat. Thanks, Spider. Wording from the Nats at the end, quote, we will deliver tax cuts to low and middle income earners, but it was never, quote, we will deliver the current proposed promised tax. Yeah, very
Weasel
good.
words.
Thank you for the
Weasel words.
super chat there, Spider. We're going to be in touch, Spider, because we want to use some of you guys on TikTok to help us win an award at the podcast awards. I'll be in touch soon. And all your massive audiences.
Go our spider army.
Okay, let's move on to the last story for tonight. And this one's a really interesting one. I don't know if you were with us last night, Fano, but I made a bit of a throwaway comment when we were talking about the burning of the Israeli flag. And the throwaway comment was, I'm going to contact the Free Speech Union and see where they stand on this. So actually about the end of the show last night, so it was 10:30 p.m. last night, I put out this tweet. Hey, New Zealand free speech. Many of us are waiting for you to voice your support for the free speech of the supporters of Palestine who, as part of their freedom of expression and speech, burned an Israeli flag in the weekend. Can you share your thoughts? Free speech for everyone? ? And that's had about 10,000 views to date. And then it got a lot of conversations, people saying that burning of a flag is not free speech, to which the New Zealand Council for Civil Liberties disagrees, which we put up. A whole bunch of chats in there, a bunch of people kind of saying to and against it. It was an interesting chat, yeah? So this afternoon, 6 hours ago, so what's that going to be? 4 o'clock this afternoon, I get tagged by the Free Speech Union. Their freedom of expression protects rights to burn Israeli flag. Now, should we take credit for that? I kind of think it's pretty coincidental that the Free Speech Union did nothing about it, because this happened, I think, on the 27th or 28th, nothing about it. And then when someone asked them about it, all of a sudden they release a statement. Now, you might already be ready for this, but the statement has a bit of a little jab in there. We'll get to that in a second, but I'm just going to read you, especially for the people who are in the audio podcast, I'm going to read you what their press release says, because we're fair here. Credit where credit's due, even if it was maybe a bit late, and even if a pissant little podcast had to force your hand from the bottom of the South Island, they have done what we often criticize them of not doing. They have come out saying, freedom of expression protects the right to burn the Israeli flag. Quote, at recent protests in Auckland denouncing conflict in the Middle East, protesters burned an Israeli flag. This action has been met with some condemnation and several police complaints have been laid. The Free Speech Union insists that this action must be protected by protesters' right to freedom of expression, says Dr. David Cummin, council member of the Free Speech Union. Freedom of expression allows for ideas and beliefs to be communicated openly without fear of undue constraint. This right should not depend on the validity or justification of the expression. Burning the Israeli flag expresses the strongly held belief of some protesters, and it is their legal right to express that. Likewise, the response by other citizens, commentators, and even senior politicians condemning this action and characterizing it as hateful is legitimate, provided such counter-speech does not transcend into attempts to suppress or censor. The Free Speech Union has consistently insisted that we must counter hate as a society, especially hate against minority, racial, or ethnic groups, and it's not the law's role to regulate speech or expression simply because some deemed it hateful. Had hate speech laws been successfully amended as proposed by the government in 2021, it is certain this protest at which Marama Davidson spoke would have fallen afoul of those laws. It is telling that certain advocates for hate speech in the name of social cohesion have recently rediscovered their belief in free speech. It is for unpopular and provocative perspectives that we need free speech and expression, such as burning an Israeli flag. Now they present a hypocritical defense of free speech, but even hypocritical speech must remain free. Censorship does not make us safer. Suppressing opinions and expression which others perceive as hateful stands to inflame the issue further. For this reason, freedom of speech and expression matter more, not less, during times of strong disagreement. Anti-Israeli protesters must be allowed to have their say. Now, I would like to speak to this.
Yes, please.
So, why I often talk about the Free Speech Union being a right-wing mouthpiece is actually echoed in this. And it's echoed in this because what they've done is they've identified how the left are being hypocritical, but they have not identified and will not identify how the right now is doing exactly the same thing. Yes, there are many on the left who called for hate speech laws to be changed, who are now hypocritically supporting what would have been deemed hate speech. However, there are many on the right, and this is what the Free Speech Union has left out, who forevermore have been yelling free speech, free speech, free speech, who are now trying to censor speech around Gaza. So I actually appreciate the Free Speech Union doing this, but it doesn't change my position that they are a psyop for a right-wing position. They've just been caught out and realizing they have to address this, because what they're saying, the left are being hypocritical on this though. Hang on, so are the right. And I'm going to show you an example, a delightful example.
Is that receipts, Pat?
I've got those receipts from today from my Twitter feed. But before I do that, Chewy, would you like to add anything to our little conversation?
Yeah, look, I just want to talk about burning flags a little bit, right? Because, yeah, absolutely, first reaction is, yeah, protesters should be able to burn an Israeli flag. That's absolutely fine. What if it was pro-Israeli people burning a Palestinian flag? What if you were burning a Nazi flag? What if you're burning a New Zealand flag? What if you were burning a trans flag? You know, there's nuance in there. And the more you dial into a particular flag, the harder it gets to really come up with a coherent sort of thing, because you might not like it.
Yeah.
You know, it can be really weaponized. It can be hugely offensive. And that's the difficulty, right? And if the Free Speech Union were genuine actors, that would be the discussion that we'd be having.
Yeah.
Because they would be charging into every unpopular speech position that anybody would want to have. They would be defending Nazis as much as they would be defending the most radical, I don't know, communist, let's get rid of billionaires club out there. But they don't. They don't pick their battle. They seem to very much fall, for the most part, on the side of rich white people.
Yeah.
You don't see them going in defending Māori activists against the wealthy. They don't speak truth to power or anything like that. So that's why we have a problem with them. Because, you know, in all of their other activities, like spinning up AstroTurf groups and that sort of thing, that's not free speech. That's paid for speech.
Yep.
And
as I've just proven, and I'll actually show you evidence shortly, what they've done, the Free Speech Union, is they've pointed out the hypocrisy of the left whilst ignoring the hypocrisy of the right. So they've done a favour to the right. So it just makes me continue to think that they are right adjacent. They are right aligned. They're not free speech aligned. Free speech aligned would be centrist. Do you know who's free speech aligned, Chewy? We are.
Who's that? Oh, yes.
No, honestly, this is the thing, and I saw it in my Twitter feed today, and I'll show you a bit of a comment on that shortly. People will go, well, I wonder what these guys would be saying if it was a Palestinian flag being burnt. Well, if you're wondering, why don't you ask us? Because actually, we're very consistent, and we're consistent because we're not really ideologues. Remember, I've told you before about that piece I wrote called Ideology versus Intelligent Debate, and I think we're not ideologues, and so we can go, this is okay here, this is okay here. We do go, Hamas committed an act of terror, as an example at the festival, and Israel is right now committing war crimes. You can hold both positions. And I'm not going to be so arrogant to say I've never been hypocritical, because I'm sure all of us have at some stage. But one of the things that we're able to do is we actually do, there's this old saying, Joe, something like walk and chew gum at the same time. And actually what you'll find here is that authentically. What you'll find, in my opinion, in places like the Free Speech Union, is a biased perspective on free speech coming from the right, supporting the right. Yes, they did something today that supported those that would probably have a left-wing perspective, but they did it whilst pointing at the left saying, hypocrites. That's not really supporting the people who are doing it. It's going, you're wrong, but you can have your free speech. But you're wrong, but you can have your free speech. You know, so it's not that. So here, let's have a look at something that happened on my Twitter feed today. So this is that tweet that I put out last night, right? Hey, New Zealand free speech, yada yada yada, waiting to voice your views. So Damien Grant jumps on my
one point of clarification.
Sure.
Just making sure, is that convicted fraudster Damien Grant?
I believe that is the case.
Okay.
He jumped on my Twitter feed and asked if he was arrested. Then it goes on to say, it seems he suffered no harm, so I'm unsure why the Free Speech Union would even need to defend him. So Free Speech Union doesn't need to get involved, right? Going through it. Now, this person says, I'm not sure who this person is, but they say as a member, I wonder if they're a member of the Free Speech Union, and they're saying that I have a fair point. Because it says somewhere that they're a member or there's something like that. Damien goes on, someone burns a flag, suffers no harm, isn't prosecuted, there are no cause I'm aware of being harassed, yada, 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 and you critique the Free Speech Union for some undefined failure because it didn't defend a person not being attacked. Oh, here we go. Well, I'm a member, so I can critique all I like. So I'm assuming Critzo is a member of the Free Speech Union saying that I've got a fair point. They go backwards and forwards, and then Damien Grant says, Pat was trolling. So I was stirring shit up.
Game recognizes game.
Well, but I wasn't. It was actually, maybe it was a troll, but it was still a genuine question. It's like, if you guys are going to be free speech, you should be being free speech. To which I responded, Pat was waiting for the Free Speech Union to do what they say they're all about, and that is support free speech, which often seems to happen when the free speech sits on the right, but they're scarce in their support when it sits on the left, even if they personally disagree with it. Pat was and is looking for consistency. Now, a little bit. So remember what Damien Grant has said. Why should the free speech even get involved? They don't need to get involved. Later on Damien Grant's own Twitter feed, he put up the press release for the Free Speech Union, and he tagged it this. This is why I'm incredibly proud to belong to the Free Speech Union, and even more to count, this is the guy who was quoted in it, as a friend. So the Free Speech Union didn't need to get involved when he was talking to me. But when they did get involved, it was the right thing to do, and he's incredibly proud. Now, here's the hypocrisy bit that I want to show to you. I had no idea Damien Grant belonged to the Free Speech Union. Because on the right, the free speech people have been starting to want to suppress speech. Remember, the Free Speech Union said the left are being hypocrites because the left wanted hate speech laws, and they're now doing things would be deemed as hate speech. I agree. That's hypocritical. I agree. I wasn't, and I don't know how firm you were, Chew. I wasn't for those hate speech laws. I thought they were clunky and poorly written and had big holes in them. I agree, right? So I'm not one of those people on the left who did that, but there are some who did. I agree. However, the Free Speech Union hasn't been saying or didn't say, and those on the right that have been screaming free speech from the rooftops have been seeking censorship based on Gaza. We now know that Damien Grant is a member of the Free Speech Union. A couple of weeks ago on Bomber's show, he said this.
Our first panellist is like a poor Mike Hosking, but with far more offensive opinions. The most white cis male columnist at Stuff with an unsurprising opinion on capital gains, the libertarian liquidator. The Cthulhu of capitalism, Damien all tax is theft Grant. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome back to the studio.
Shalom.
One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Anti-Semitism. We are inundated with anti-Semitism. There is far too much of it, Bomber, including on your website.
I'm going to allow that to slide.
Really?
We can get into it, but I've got a lot of other things to talk about.
I'm going to keep coming back to it.
Well, you can, and we'll have that discussion at some.
Platform John Minto.
He's
an anti-Semite.
I understand this is a very emotional time for you, and I'm going to be very kind.
You platform John Minto, he's an anti-Semite. Now, Chewy, to me, maybe he wasn't explicit in saying you shouldn't have platformed it. That sounded like someone who thought to platform someone's views, to give them some kind of free speech because of what they were saying, was wrong. Yeah. And that's an example that we've seen all over the place. So yes, there are many on the left who supported those hate speech laws. I'm not one of them, but there are many on the left who did, who are now participating in things that probably would have deemed hate speech under those laws. But there are many on the right who have been screaming free speech from the rooftops, who are now screaming censorship, please, because we don't like these views about Gaza. And that's the hypocrisy at play.
Yeah. And look, I'll freely stick my hand up to that, right? I was very, I agree with what you said about the free speech laws. Yes, there were big holes in it. And then you come into the thing of like, well, who decides what it's free speech and what's hate speech and what's not? And yeah, that's a minefield. But yeah, all it takes is the argument to turn, the discussion to turn. If we're talking about burning flags and that sort of thing, I would love to burn a Nazi flag in front of a Nazi. But then what if that Nazi is burning, an LGBT or trans flag or something like that? Well, shit, I'm not so keen on that, right?
But they're allowed to do it.
When it comes to flags, there's one thing to remember. Yes, it's a powerful symbol. Does your belief or who you are survive a flag being burned? Yes, it does.
I got to say as well, the other part of that conversation that I didn't finish off when I said I wasn't a fan of those hate speech laws personally. I didn't think they were well written. I thought there was lots of issues with them. But equally, from the other side, I'm not a free speech purist or absolutist. Mm-hmm. So remember, those on the right that claim to be the free speech purists, like the Free Speech Union, they have people involved with their organisation, like Damien Grant that we've just shown you, who have been trying to, actively thinking it would be better not to hear these views. So if you're on the far left or the left, and you were someone who wanted those hate speech laws, and you think they were the absolutely right way to go, that's the equal and opposite from someone who's on the right and who thinks that speech should never be impinged upon. That's the Free Speech Union. That's some people on the far left. Both of them have had an opportunity to be hypocritical in this current conversation. Both of those groups have had members who have been hypocritical, but the Free Speech Union only chose to point out those on the left being hypocritical. That's why I will still happily put them as a right-wing psyop, Joey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No disagreement from me at all.
And that's me pretty much. Anything else you want to get for the night?
No, I think we've covered off some not good stuff, obviously, because of the world. But yes, some good topics, some good just meaty topics.
Yeah. Look, I think as well, just talking more, I guess, generally now, the idea about, I'm not a free speech purist, meaning, and people call themselves free speech absolutists, which means I think there are some tethers on speech, which means I don't and won't ever agree wholeheartedly 100% all the time with people who think they are free speech absolutists. And I think hate speech laws written as absolutes are potentially dangerous and could lead to other places, but I absolutely don't want to see hate speech being used. So you can sort of be in the camp. So if I'm in the camp, I'm in more of the camp of the supporters of the people who don't want to see hate speech, but I also know legislation is something that could actually hamper and be dangerous to unyet explained areas of our life and thought through areas of our life, especially if it's not done well. And often legislation needs to be quite precise, and the legislation around those hate speech laws wasn't precise. What was proposed wasn't precise at all. And that was my big issue with it. Likewise, the freedom of speech thing, I always err towards more free speech, but I'm not an absolutist. And I mean, the truth is nobody is. People who say they are actually aren't. Because they would still say, because if you're an absolutist, then they'll say, as long as it doesn't, cause violence. Okay, so you're not an absolutist. So you do have some strings attached. Your strings are just attached maybe slightly different places from where mine will be attached. That's what it is. So we have a disparity in how far you would go for free speech versus me. We have a disparity on how far you would go on hate laws than me. We both agree that ways of stopping hateful speech is great. I actually think that's the right thing and the morally correct thing to do. But we also both agree that impinging free speech should be at a minimum. And so you can actually live in both worlds. People seem to think you can't, but you can. And I think that's one of the things that makes us consistent and sort of hard to trip up. I mean, show us where we're wrong. We always say it. Just show us.
I think in all things, Pat, you'd be very afraid of the absolutist.
Yeah.
Very afraid of the fundamentalist in anything. Those two words make me go cold.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing in the Middle East. We're seeing an absolutist position. We won't stop until we decide to stop, all of that sort of thing. I see in the chat, the DIY guru says it's funny how we're quite happy to discuss, how offensive it is to burn a flag, as an example. What's more offensive, burning a flag or bombing a hospital?
Yeah, for sure.
Pulling dead children out of rubble. That's pretty offensive.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I was a bit interested actually looking at the newspapers and stuff today and seeing, how much there was still about the All Blacks going on, and how little, like on the front page of the online of stuff in the Herald and that. And yeah, there was some stuff about Israel and Gaza, but it certainly wasn't the main headline. It was almost infotainment in the news today. So here we are. Hey, big old thanks to Madison and to Justin. I'm looking at a couple of orders that have come in tonight from the bhnshop.nz. Appreciate your patronage. We won't be here live tomorrow night. There will be a show at 9 o'clock. My daughter is, I don't know if in America they call it graduating. What's the right word for New Zealand? For leavers?
Yeah,
the leavers?
that works.
Whatever. Well, she's not graduating because she hasn't got her results yet, but she's got her sort of leavers night on her last night of school, and she's getting a bunch of awards for music and drama and some bits and bobs as well. So I'm going to be along there, and then we might go out for dinner afterwards. So there won't be a live show tomorrow night, but there will be a pre-recorded show. I'll find some clips tomorrow, and if you've got any clip you particularly want to see, feel free to tweet me through the next sort of 12 hours. Other than that, there will be a show tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. Oh, thanks, Felix. There will be a show tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, and then we'll be back live on Thursday night for another action-packed show of bullshit-a-rama.
I think one comment to leave on, and this is a good point. I mention this a lot to people, and I haven't mentioned it on the show. Al Jazeera is once again batting 100 on their nuanced coverage of what's going on. I think there's a lot of criticism from CNN and the major US networks and BBC, and rightly deserved, in my opinion. Whereas Al Jazeera has just been solid coverage. Yeah. If you want nuance and you want analysis and you want someone pushing back a little bit, you could do a lot worse.
Cool bananas. All right, team, you're all very beautiful, especially you right now. I can see you. I can see you looking at your screen. You're the most beautiful. And we'll catch you tomorrow night in a pre-recorded show, and Thursday night live again from 9 p.m. in another edition of Big Hairy News. Ta-ta.
Cheers, fam.